Trump isn't going to do anything about gay rights. You have nothing to worry about. You're being so dramatic. Okay, tell me you just don't understand constitutional law. I unfortunately do. I took a law class at Bible college where I learned about the very detailed and long-term plans that conservatives have to get rid of gay rights. I unfortunately have my study guide for my law final here. So let's take a little trip down the history of Supreme Court cases. In 1965, there was Griswold versus Connecticut that created an implied right to privacy in the Constitution. This was the case that allowed married couples to have access to birth control. Let's remember, this is the one where we came up with the implied right to privacy. Then in 1972, we had Eisenstadt versus Baird, allowing unmarried couples to have access to contraceptions. In case you don't know, the Supreme Court works on precedent. So everything is based upon A, the Constitution, and B, past rulings of the Supreme Court on the Constitution. Okay, moving on. Then we had Roe versus Wade. We all know what Roe versus Wade was. Doe versus Bolton was a secondary piece of that, but both of those built on those former two precedents. Then we have Planned Parenthood versus Casey, which kind of just like solidified Roe versus Wade. We don't need to get into that too deeply. And we have Lawrence versus Texas. This one was in 2003. I'm 22 years old. This happened when I was 1, okay? When I was 1 is when the Supreme Court decided that states could not put people in prison for being gay. And do you know what precedent that was based upon? The same one, the implied right to privacy. So then we have Obergefell versus Hodges, which is the one that happened in 2015, 9 years ago. Super recent history, made it so states have to recognize gay marriage. When Roe versus Wade was overturned, and I'm putting it in air quotes because that's actually not what the Supreme Court case did, it overturned the implied right to privacy. That's what turned abortion back to the states. If the implied right to privacy is stated to no longer exist, which is exactly what happened in the overturning of Roe versus Wade, then every other court case that's built on that precedent will likely be revisited. So how does this have anything to do with Trump? The president doesn't have anything to do with the Supreme Court. Oh wait, the president appoints justices to the Supreme Court, and justices have lifelong appointments, and there very likely will be another Supreme Court appointment in the next 4 years. And unfortunately, if that happens, that means we will be stuck with an overwhelmingly conservative Supreme Court for the next 40, 50 years, which means that when these cases are reheard, it is very likely that all of these things will be turned back to the state. And if you think all of that doesn't affect you, they want to go after no-fault divorce, you would have to prove that you were in an abusive marriage and go through long court proceedings to be able to leave that abusive marriage. You think this doesn't affect you? It does.